好高好高好高你，好高好。异象乍现，天地顿开，散落在历史洪流中的哈嘎之光，召唤着黑皮与皮下组织。在这趟哈嘎宁大迁徙的漫漫旅途中，艺术被创造，世界被连结，历史被推动。究竟这会是趟怎么样的冒险呢？欢迎各位武林中人来到各个客栈卡卡卡店，一探究竟。
Hello everyone, welcome to Taiwan Bar. Today we're going to talk about Taiwan's economic miracle. Out of many Asian countries, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Korea had the highest growth rates in their economies, and were called the Four Asian Dragons, although Taiwan is more like a worm right now. But a lot of folks don't know much about Taiwan's economic success, other than some government policies that were not too shabby. How exactly did this miracle happen? In 1945, the curtains falled for the Great East Asia War in the Pacific. Taiwan's industrial infrastructure built under the Japanese rule, like power plants, telecom towers, and oil refineries, were all destroyed by the Allied forces. At the time, Taiwan seemed to have no future. The economy was like a good girl gone bad. You best believe it's gone forever. When the ROC government took over Taiwan, Taiwan's economy was then connected to China's, affected easily by the Chinese Civil War. Inflation, unemployment, and public anger rose greatly. So, how did Taiwan start from the bottom, and how did it bring the whole team here? Here we go! In 1949, the inflation was so bad, actual currency was like monopoly money, so the national monetary reform took place. 40,000 old Taiwan dollars could be exchanged for one new Taiwan dollar, the kind we're still using today, cutting all economic strings attached to China and restricting the damage caused by inflation. But the KMT, which was in great debt after moving to Taiwan, had no budget to help Taiwan's economy take off. Even under pressure from the commies and the peeps, the government's mind was still fixed on retaking the mainland, but at the same time, didn't have what it takes. At this moment, a war jumped out of nowhere and saved Taiwan's economy. That war was the Korean War. Simida. This civil Simida War, yo, started fiercely Simida in Korea, yo, and Mao Zedong, in order to fight the US and help Korea, transferred the focus of his army from Taiwan to North Korea. In turn, the US set up a defense line from South Korea to Malaysia to fight against communism. Although Uncle Sam didn't think much about the KMT, Taiwan still held a key position in the defense line, so the US kinda had to help Taiwan a bit, you know? Sign a Sino-American Mutual Defense Treaty and whatnot. As a result, all kinds of support came from the US, and in general, we called this the US aid. From 1951 to 1965, the US aid accumulated up to 1.5 billion US dollars. At that time, it was omnipresent in Taiwan. You could see grandpops and grannies lining up in the street for supplies, and kiddos wearing undies made from flour bags with Sino-American labels. Apart from daily supplies, the US aid also invested heavily in Taiwan's agriculture and infrastructure. From the Shimen Reservoir, the Xiluo Bridge, to the Central Cross Island Highway, all of these were outcomes of the US aid. In short, the depressed post-war economy was rescued by the good old fairy godmother known as the US aid. And the barely breathing ROC government was relieved from les misérables. Besides the US aid, the government also had to do something to save its own buttocks. In 1949, the Taiwan provincial government carried out a land reform, hoping to improve farmers' living conditions. The 37.5% Arable Rent Reduction Act restricted the upper limit of land rent, and the Public Land Release allowed farmers to own public land. Finally, the Land to the Tiller Act let farmers keep the land instead of landlords. These reformations changed the fate of farmers and landlords. So it sounded great, being the breaker of change and mother of social classes, you know? But at the same time, it robbed the landlords' properties. So landlords thought, yo, why'd you reduce the arable rent, bro? Why'd you take my land, bro? Why'd you give my land to farmers while I was sleeping, bro? But at the same time, Taiwan was still in the period of white terror. The provincial governor Chen Cheng once said, "The 37.5% Arable Rent Reduction Act must be conducted without hesitation. There might be difficulties. There might be shameless rebels. But I believe there will not be
idiots with a death wish.
With just a few words, he scared the landlords to death. Even if they didn't agree, they kept quiet and sucked it up. No matter what, the monetary and land reform plus the US aid gradually revived Taiwan's economy after the war. Cotton yarn sent from the US helped develop the textile industry. Wheat sent from the US helped develop the food industry. And because of the US aid, Taiwan was able to make noodles, bread, and donuts. Donuts! The Taiwanese, who for the most part ate rice, gradually accepted noodles and other flour-made food under promotion of the government. Daily necessities that used to rely entirely on imports could finally be produced by ourselves and replace imports. So this period in time became the stage we call the import substitution period. In the 1960s, the US aid ended. Besides being a crybaby, Taiwan had to come up with new ways to help the economy, like the Export Processing Zone set up at that time and the Investment Incentive Act carried out by the government. These were both methods hoping to encourage investments to replace the US aid. The Investment Incentive Act allowed many companies and investors to have tax reduction. But did these profits made from companies really benefit Taiwan? Did they go into the pockets of big enterprises or small citizens? Under the assistance of the government, many private companies began to thrive, and those who originally sold rice or wood became Warren Buffetts. In short, Taiwan's economy started to lean towards exports. The GNI, GDP, everything increased substantially. What an amazing government, you must think, right? But exporting won't work by just planning. You need to have customers as well. Luckily, Taiwan hit the jackpot and caught up with the international economy bandwagon. Taiwan replaced Japan's role as Japan was moving on to the next economic stage and became the OEM of industrial products. Hence, Taiwan got to sell, and foreigners got to buy. Hold on, let's clarify something real quick. Speaking of the 10 major constructions projects, everyone seems to think those represent Taiwan's economic miracle, right? This large scale of post-war public constructions, of course, contributed greatly to the livelihood economy, especially to land and air transportation. For example, the North Link line connected the east and the west, reducing travel time. And the Formosa Freeway, though always criticized for being built for the rich, also turned into the transportation lifeline of Taiwan. Not to mention the largest airport in Taiwan, the Taoyuan International Airport. Now it is always flooded with tourists. But to be honest, some constructions used to be useful, but are kinda out of date today. Like the port of Taichung. It was built to be the international port of central Taiwan. But it seemed like the people who built it missed a few geography classes, because the port always suffered from tides and silt, wasting the government a fortune on maintaining. Also, for some unknown reason, the tiny Su'ao port was also dragged into being part of the 10 major constructions. You know the only thing major you can get out of expanding such a small port? A major financial loss. Get that. In the 70s, being environmentally friendly was the new cool thing. So the petrochemical industries and the nuclear power plants in the 10 major constructions, although helpful for Taiwan's economy, also faced a lot of protests because of pollution. I wonder if the government knew that some constructions would be rendered obsolete by the time they were finished. Sometimes there are things you'll regret tomorrow if you don't do them today. But looking at failed constructions, maybe there are also things you'll regret no matter what. After all that talk, we now seem to understand a little bit more about Taiwan's economic miracle. In a time of globalization, economic development not only requires our own effort, but also a keen eye for international trends. In the past, the economic miracle seemed like smooth sailing. However, the sacrifices and side effects it caused should not be ignored. Environmental pollution and agricultural damage, plus the worsening disparity between the rich and the poor, all teach us a lesson. What kind of development are we pursuing? We used to be taught that Taiwan started from farming, went through an export processing stage, then it relied on light industry, heavy industry, all the way to high-tech and service industries, yada yada yada. We always thought that economic development was like climbing on a ladder. All we had to do was climb step by step. Don't think, don't whine, don't hesitate. But is this really the case? Or is it possible that a ladder might be suitable for others, but not for us? Is it possible that we'll end up discovering nothing at the top of the ladder before finding out that it's a one-way trip? Let's assume there is a universal ladder that's good for everyone. which step is Taiwan currently on? And where should the next step take us? Alrighty, after all that talk, I'm a bit thirsty. After drinking this piece of chicken cake, we'll see you next time. Bye!